From what I can tell, you can tell a story, which is all I care about. I'll tell you. I'll see if you got any questions before we get started. But man, I start the podcast by just saying I hate podcasts, and I hate podcasts because so many people they just ask questions and then sit back, and it's just boring. So I like to have conversations, and so that's why I put it out the way that I do. Is like, if you can tell a story, come on. But I've only had to shut one podcast down in the last couple of months. And it was just like, I'll tell you exactly what happened. I asked the question. The first question, the guy's answer was no.
Yeah, that's great. So I've met bad hosts. Most of them are pretty good. And then like the guys I connect with, I'm like, hey, have you ever had to carry an entire show? And dudes are like, yeah, not often, but like, and then there's others who, my wife hosts a podcast as well. She does book marketing. And like she'd say, so tell me how you got into writing. And then it's 15 minutes. Like the guy doesn't break. Like, so there's a little balance there.
There's a little bit in, but that's exactly right. But I'll take the 15-minute guy because I can interrupt that dude.
No, I agree.
Yeah. So any questions I can answer for you?
Just shoot
Let's go. Perfect. Yeah. I did a little bit of research on you. I got 4 or 5 questions. If I get to 2 of them, we've not done a good podcast, right? Okay. If I ask too many of the ones I wrote down, we didn't do a good podcast. So I like to kind of wing it.
I like how you start the recording right off the bat. I've talked with some folks. I'm like, hey man, we just did a show right here, but you didn't record it.
Yeah. Well, after 3, I don't know how many of these I've done, 350 or so. I figured out there's a lot of good stuff at the beginning, at the end that we miss out on over the years. So I pushed the button right away. All right, let's do this. All right, everybody, before we get into today's episode, I got a favor to ask you. If you have been watching the podcast for a while and you're getting something out of all of this, I want you to take a second and hit that subscribe button, please. When I started this podcast, the goal wasn't necessarily to chase views or interview celebrities, but I will take all of that. It was more to sit down with interesting people who have lived a life and built businesses or overcome hard things or have something worth saying that we all can be entertained by and learn from. So if you believe in what we're building here, I want you to hit subscribe, and in return, I'll keep doing my part. I'll keep finding guests who challenge the way we think, who will tell the truth about business and life. I'm going to make this show worth coming back for you every week. I appreciate all of y'all more than you know. Now, let's get into today's conversation. All right, welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Kronos Group Podcast. I am your host, Jerry Bracy. I got an interesting guest today. Let's see how this goes. Today's guest, he is unusual in his career path. Most people I don't know go from preaching sermons on a Sunday to kicking doors in with the FBI, but that is apparently what Eric Robinson did. He has spent 12 years as a pastor before joining the FBI, where he spent the next 24 years working everything from counterterrorism and public corruption to gangs, crimes against children, which I want to talk to him about, SWAT, and recruiting informants. What interested me the most, though, isn't just the badge and what I want to talk about today. It was the people, because whether you're a pastor trying to help somebody change their life or an FBI agent trying to convince an informant to trust you, I think in a way you're dealing with the same thing, human nature. Why do people lie? Why do they tell the truth? Why do they make terrible decisions? Why do some people change and then other people don't? That's part of what I want to talk about today, just not the law enforcement side. I want to see if he can help us understand people, because entrepreneurs hire people. We lead people. You negotiate with all sorts of people. You sell things. You raise children. You have marriages. You make decisions based on how you read people, hopefully correctly. I have a feeling there's a lot more similarities between what he did then and what we are all doing now. So with that said, Eric, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Absolutely. Jerry, I got into breaking down doors because I thought it would be better for church outreach, but I found that those people didn't stick too long in my church.
Yeah.
So just stuck with the FBI. Yeah, I just stuck with the FBI from there.
So let's talk about the pastor part to start with. And you spent 12 years and you became an FBI agent. Do I just have that timeline correct?
Yeah, I started out, my intention was to go into the mission field working in Muslim countries. So my wife and I had that intent. Things kind of got sour with some family issues, so stayed stateside and went youth pastor, assistant pastor, until I spent the last 6, 7 years as a senior pastor of a Baptist church in Western New York.
And the reasons for becoming an agent, did you lose your faith? You just needed to move on? Tell me about that from a religious perspective.
The short answer is that I needed a job with less stress. And
Okay.
the reason behind that was I enjoyed doing ministry. I think I was good at it too. We were reaching people. We had a church that was growing. We meant to be a church of outreach, not just shuffling Christians from one seat to another. And people were coming to church for the first time. The problem I had that I had never learned, and other pastors know to do this better, I was not capable of separating my congregants' problems from bearing the burden myself. So that led to a lot of stress, and that stress led to daily headaches for 2 years, every single day. And there came a point where I just recognized my body's trying to tell me something. It's giving me these headaches. If I don't address this and find something different, then who knows what it's going to do next to me. So went to find a new job. I preached my last sermon on Easter Sunday, 2002. I was in the FBI Academy the next Sunday. And then the Sunday after that, I was preaching in the FBI Academy in the chapel because they needed a chaplain to fill in.
Perfect. And how is your faith now?
My faith has, it's broadened in some ways. It's changed quite a bit. Not all of that is from what I saw in the FBI. I think the things that I saw in law enforcement helped to broaden my belief system better. I was never one that had a sharp black and white line, but seeing how people come from different backgrounds and experiences and traumas than I did helped to make that gray area even broader to understand, yeah, it's not as simple as Bible says this and you fall on one side or the other.
It appears to be, my background, I went to a Christian school. I grew up in abject poverty. I have 8 brothers and sisters. But the school let us in, and it's back in the 70s where we were getting beaten 2-3 times a week, forced to stand against a wall and get this great Christian education. I wouldn't change it for anything, for all the good and all the bad. It was a cult for sure, but man, I have a lot of information and a lot of great memories having done that. And then I haven't been in a church for 45 years, and I'm a believer, but I have trouble, and lately, as I've gotten older, I'm 57, and I have been thinking about going back. So the last year and a half, I've been doing a bunch of research, and every time I get close, I find hypocrisies in Christian churches that I can't get around. As an example, I don't understand when we have, kids right down the street that don't have enough food or have drug addict parents or have their own issues. Why are we saving people on the other side of the planet? Why are pastors traveling to other places? Things along those names. When I was a kid, the pastors and elders, I didn't have enough food to eat, but every 2 years they had a new Cadillac. And so those sort of things always push back against, especially now I see it and I see the same sort of things going on. So from that perspective, this is probably the strangest question you've ever had asked of you on a podcast. What's your take on that from that perspective? As a layman, it just seems like they should be helping the guy across the street and worrying less about the guy in Nicaragua.
Well, I 2 things with that. One is, as a pastor, I used to be confronted with people saying, well, I don't like going to church because of hypocrisy. And I would say, well, look, everyone is a hypocrite. Everyone has degrees of how they are not true to their values. Like learn what you can accept and you can't. Now I'm on the other side, and there are certainly hypocrisies that I can't accept in churches. And part of that came from looking into white supremacists doing domestic terrorism investigations. I'm looking at people who are saying Jesus is Lord and little chuggy Bible verses on their Facebook, and then next to that are abhorrent, racist, bigoted statements. And then I would see True story. Oh, there's an elder from my church who's friends with him and seems to be okay with this whole process. So now the hypocrisy goes, even broader to you're not living in kindness and love. As far as you're saying, like, hey, why aren't you taking care of people around here? Yeah, okay. I'm not going to argue with you. I can go along with that. There's so much that a church can do, and I'm going to go beyond you saying why not take care of the kids in your own neighborhood. I agree, but why aren't you just living out the values that Christ said we should? Why are you speaking with bigotry and hatred? Why are you condemning people instead of just accepting? So there's a lot you could say is a problem in the church.
Do you think that I've done very well for myself over the years, again, in business, and I have a good insight into how money corrupts and what kind of money and power, particularly power over people, the kind of corruption that can inure in people. And so in churches, mega churches in particular, I see the telltale signs of I'm going here and doing this because I look good doing it, as opposed to it's the thing that I should be doing. Do you see that? Have you seen that over in all your time?
Yeah, I have become very upset in seeing how, and I don't know why I'm surprised by this, but there's an influence.
Hey, everybody, quick break. I want to tell you about something I'm doing for the first time. I'm putting together the first Kronos Group cohort. That's 10 business owners max. And understand, this is not a course, it's a peer level work with other operators and direct access to me on a month to month basis. We're going to go deep on what actually moves the needle for businesses, like systems and sales and leadership and staying sane while you're building something real: fitness, health, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. This group is for you. The people who get in on this first cohort get founder pricing, and that's the trade for going first. And it won't be open long, and it's not going to stay at this price for sure. If you've been listening to this show or me and thinking you need a room like this, you probably do. 10 spots, founder special. Check it out. The link's in the show notes.
Money can come along with it, but it's more towards the power,
Yeah.
where it can be a mega church, and obviously that's going to feed into an ego and dark sides more in mankind. But it can be a church of 100, and I would see this when I was pastoring, that power that that typically men have to say, I am the authority, I speak for God, and they may not say those words, but over time, when you are looked at that way, now it's hard for a person not to become corrupted. Like, maybe I would get that way if enough people said that to me and gave me that image without me grounding myself. So there have been many pastors where it's not the usual sexual escapades, although usually the sexual problems come out of an entitlement as well. But it's so often spiritual abuse, just harshness, lording over people as if there's a different class of Christian, and I belong to that top one. So it doesn't matter what you're in, who you are. Being in a position where people tell you you are God's spokesperson can easily bring out the worst in a character.
Yeah. Um, it's interesting that you found the being a pastor, the stress from that was so much. It resonated a little bit with me. I spent a bunch of time over the last 5-6 years. I was dying laying in a hospital here in Williamson County Hospital down here in Tennessee. That's 308 pounds. I had a 40% block in my left ventricle. I was having 100 mini heart attacks. I was down 3.8 pints of blood of the 10 I have in my body. I was on the way out at 51 years old, and I decided I was going to live. And I'm in the best shape of my life now at 57 than I ever have been. And the turnaround, I started documenting it. And from then I began to have conversations, and I've talked to hundreds of mostly men, some women, but mostly men through my TikTok videos and things like that. And one of the things that resonated with me when you said that is I had to cut back on that
Mm.
because I want for them what I have so strongly that it was affecting me in a way that I didn't anticipate, because I didn't have any concept that so few of them had the wherewithal to do what I did. I didn't expect everybody to do it, but so few of them did it, and it sucked the life out of me. So when you said that, it reminded me of that. I don't know if that's analogous, but let me finish, I guess, just the rest of the question, which is, and then contrast that with what I think culturally we would think the FBI would be far worse than anything stress related than what you would have dealt with as a pastor. So I guess there's two questions in there.
Well, the stress for me was, if you come to me, just talking about your situation at 51, if you're in my congregation, it's not like I can just go to the hospital, visit once and go, oh, okay, I did my job. Like you are entrusted to me. And it was an unhealthy way that I felt that, but it's not as simple as me going, oh, okay, I did my job. I said a prayer with them. Now you are still continuing to be at harm. Are you going to live? How does this affect your life? And that would happen with so many people. And I was a senior pastor. I was solo. Again, my fault, early 30s, didn't know enough. I had no group around me that I could trust, that I could say, hey, I'm having an issue with this. This is hard. So I'm dealing with it all by myself. Get to the FBI and yeah, I mean, I obviously went through much more traumatic experiences in the FBI than in ministry, saw greatly disgusting things. But here's 20 people on my squad, 15 people, guys on the SWAT team who they understand because they either went through it themselves or if I tell them, they're like, yeah, I get that. So here is a built-in group that understands and speaks my language and supports. Pastor, I got to be perfect. I have to do things right. I can't show up poorly. FBI, I just had to be a good FBI agent. And okay, I can do that. I didn't have to meet some standard that I felt was there in ministry. So yeah, it's a different stress. I got very few guns pointed at me in ministry, unlike in the FBI. But, then that was over. I survived and now we move on.
Yeah, that's it's one of those things I found myself doing that same thing. So that's interesting. I would text. These are people I don't know. I'm not getting paid. They're all over the country, all over the world in some cases. I'm texting with them 20 times. Interesting thing, they would start kind of the program that I did to get where I was, and they would make it, and I would tell them, I'm not going to hear from you on about the 23rd, 24th day. I could write it down. And about the 23rd, 24th day of doing the exercises and eating the correct diet and all these things that for free, just because I want to help, laid out for them, these people would disappear, so much so that it became like clockwork. But I poured so much of my heart into it, I suppose, because I wanted these 350-pound men and these 280-pound, 5'3" women to have back what their lives, that I took it on me when they would fail at it. It was really I had never experienced something like that before.
Yeah, I think we're talking at the same level of, fortunately for you, you're doing this just out of goodness as a side thing.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what I'm living. And the cue to me clearly that I had made the right decision to take a different career path was the day I got my conditional acceptance in the FBI, headaches went away. And it was every day. So that comes, I remember thinking, I don't have to do this anymore. I can move on to something else and, never experience that again.
Yeah, that's interesting. Let's move on to the FBI. Something again that's near and dear to my heart, based on my background and where I come from, is the child side of. There were some comments that you had worked in some of those areas. I don't think that this stuff gets talked about enough, Eric. In fact, I was thinking about that this morning I run 4 miles every morning, and in thinking about the conversation with you, this is something, like I said, that's near and dear to my heart. But the words, like even the word child rape is a word that does not get used, right? It's always molestation or it's always trauma. There seems to be, and then, the fact that these are hundreds of thousands of children, millions of children over the years. The U.S. is a huge market for that. Why this isn't on the front page of every newspaper on a daily basis? Why aren't churches emptying their coffers to try to save all of these children? Why aren't the government doing more to try to do it? So again, I'm a little passionate about it, and I wasn't even sure how to exactly ask the right question. So I just thought, here's how I feel. I don't feel like we're doing nearly enough because they're kids. Give us some background on that from your insider information.
Well,
Experience, I should say.
I'm not going to make you feel better right now.
Yeah,
It,
good. That's
I,
fine. That's
I
fine.
worked the child exploitation, the violent crimes against children, headed up that task force for a time. We had a different mandate then than there is now. And the team that works that now, at least in my area, the guys I know, um, they could make a case every day if they wanted to, except that it takes too much time to set up the operations, to get the evidence. Like if they had enough bodies, they could do a hit every day. But it's just it'd be they would do that for 2 weeks and be done for the year because now they've got all that background of going through forensics and the computers and phones. So if you had 100 people, I worked in Toledo, Ohio. It's a city of about 250,000 people. We covered a number of counties outside that, but you could have 100 people working just this area and getting hits every day. I witnessed my buddy as an online undercover trying to speak to dudes who are out there who are soliciting. He was posing as someone who had children that he could bring for people to assault. And I remember him telling me, he goes, this guy, I don't want to go arrest him, but he just keeps coming back. Like I'm focused on this guy. So he was giving up targets to focus on somebody else he thought was more important until the guy became so intractable, like coming at him. He's like, let's go arrest him. Like that is the case. And there's something surreal about sitting in a parking lot waiting to do a takedown where this is a guy who is coming, believing he's meeting with another man who says he's got a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old for him to come and assault. And then the guy shows up and you think, that's real. Like this guy really came thinking he was going to get to do this. And
Now, again,
maybe
you said assault. I just want to be clear. We're talking sex with a 5-year-old, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to say it, I try to be a little.
If we get shut down,
Yeah.
I take offense. I think we do that to keep everybody asleep. I almost consider it propaganda, right? We change the words so that they don't have the same meaning, so that the 10-year-old whose uncle, got out of line with her when he sat on her lap at a birthday party is the same thing as what you're describing, and they are not the same things. They are far from the same things. And I think that in society today, we just don't use it enough because, I don't know, I think if there was some context for the vastness of this problem, that social or society-wise, civilization-wise, population-wise, I just can't imagine there wouldn't be a bigger revolt. I can't figure out why this isn't a bigger story. And you're talking about tiny Toledo, Ohio, and it's an absolute pandemic.
Yeah. So if you're going to speak frankly, here's a guy we pick up and we arrest, and in his vehicle he has lubricant, he has Benadryl to put the child, a little groggier, and then poppers to dilate the anus. So he has everything available for him to rape a child. Yeah, and that is, it's, as I said, it's surreal. Like you can talk about it, but then now here it is right in front. I've just tackled this guy. This is a real person who's looking to do this. And other than like some guys chickening out, being afraid that's the police, these events could be set up daily where they're getting men, sometimes women, who are thinking here's a great offer and then saying, hey, I've got kids too, me first, then we'll trade. When I worked the crimes against children, our mandate years ago was working more towards finding the pimps who were promoting teenage prostitutes, which is sex trafficking. Anyone under 18, any female, ours were exclusively female, any female who is being directed in any way, assisted, coerced, pushed into sex acts with other men for money, that's sex trafficking, and those guys were hit hard.
This is a strange moral argument. But at some point, some reason has to be applied to this. And it seems to me that the 5-year-old is worse than the 14-year-old.
Yeah,
Is there some, I mean, morally, that's all terrible. So,
it
but
is.
again, cooler heads have to prevail. It seems like resources should have gone to the little kids as opposed to the bigger kids. Is there a reason why that's the case?
Well, to your question, yes, because specifically in 2005, there was a prostitution sting in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, at a truck stop, and an inordinate number of pimps and sex workers from the Toledo area were picked up there. And therefore, it was presumed that Toledo had an inordinate problem. And now the FBI focused on that. And there was plenty of work we could do too. I mean, that was there. So it's like anything else. Like if there's a huge gang problem, why aren't we putting more bodies to gangs? Well, we got national security issues. We've got to have that going too. You can make arguments over what's best to go after, but we could have gone after the pimps all year and still had that need with the kids. We could have gone after the kids all year and still had the issues with the pimps too. So
is it a manpower problem? They just, which seems crazy to say when we're talking about the U.S. government, right? Is it that they just not enough resources?
It is to a degree, but then also you can't just hire as many people as you want into the FBI because now you're going to be not getting as many quality people. There still have to be those standards that, you're looking to bring in people at an even pace. And then the ultimate choke point is not bodies in the FBI. It's in the U.S. Attorney's Office. So, we could have 20 agents working and a few assistant U.S. attorneys, and they're not enough. Because as soon as one case goes to trial, that guy's eaten up for 2 months. And now, you lack the ability to go forward on other cases. And because of that, the prosecutors would pass on good cases, not because these guys wouldn't probably get indicted and then probably get convicted, but the possibility at all of this going to trial was enough to make them pass on it. So I could bring them 10 guys and say, hey, here's guys we should indict. And they go, hey, we're only going to go with 7. Because these 3, I agree with you, they're guilty, but these 3 are likely to go to trial, and we just can't afford the manpower to go to trial.
So on the trafficker side, then I had never thought about this before. Is it a fair comparison to say it's like running drugs across the border, and if you lose 25% of the drugs coming across, that means 75% got through? Do the traffickers know that there is that reality that not everybody's going to get caught up in the net?
No, the smart ones, the guys who have been pimps for a while, the smartest ones would not mess with underage girls. It was more often the ones trying to make a name so they get more money off the young girls. They probably wouldn't have as much authority and experience, and so they could control a 16-year-old, a 15-year-old better than a 22-year-old. So there's a lot of factors that played into it. So the guys who had been in the game long enough, they knew to stay away from the underage girls because that was a mandatory 15 years in prison. So yeah, with the dopers, you're right with that. They count that into the expenses like Target counts shoplifting. With these guys, it was so often fellows trying to make a name for themselves. And the crazy thing about the pimps too, is so many of them would fight charges because this teenage girl was already prostituting. So she was a runaway. She had bad parents. She's on her own. She didn't have labor skills or an education that she could depend upon to get a job. She had her body and that was it. Now she was out on her own making money. This guy comes along. The difference between you and me and this guy is you see a young girl who's prostituting and you're like, hey, let me help you. This guy says, awesome, let me make money off of you. So they were just mainly continuing what the teenage girls were doing. They're just benefiting from it. Obviously, some could be abusive as well, but the whole idea is like You don't profit off of a teenage girl having sex. You don't promote that.
Did are most of the that you ran into in that area, are the pimps? Are they, native born Americans? Are they Eastern Europeans? Are they South Americans? What who's doing this?
Now, in the Toledo area, the ones that we saw were, I can't remember anybody being foreign born. They were all from the area. Many of them had come from that culture as well, with other men telling them, this is how you are, showing you're a man, you're controlling a stable of women. And then there was glory in it, like guys in certain channels bragging about the women that they had, how they control them. So there was a real machismo to it that they fed into, because that's what they had been taught is important to do as a man. So they were all Americans who just grew up thinking, yeah, this is what you do. You manage women this way.
How Two more questions on this. How big, from your perspective, being an insider, how big is the problem, let's say, of underage, and in particular child sex trafficking? How big the problem is in the United States?
Well, so the question of trafficking, the term trafficking, most people think of moving, like I'm taking somebody around. Uh, uh, an underage person can be trafficked and never leave their house. So it's the trafficking is the idea of profiting off of that. So it, it could happen without a profit. There's the sexual abuse that goes on. Once someone brings another person in, now you could call that trafficking. Yeah, it's pervasive. It's not like every neighbor is going to be involved in this, but you're going to find victims who don't even understand that they're being trafficked, probably, that they see this as part of normal life. It could be a woman who's 25 years old, married or living with her significant other for 10 years, not realizing that she's being trafficked because of how he provides her to friends. I mean, that could be sex trafficking as well. So there's many different forms. There's the traditional you think of, and then there's just the usual what happens in common everyday situations where it's still so abusive, but the signals aren't necessarily there in the same way that, you might normally think of. Like the Eastern Europeans coming in and getting underage girls, taking them on a yacht. That can happen. That's not very often. It's typically going to be just in a small community.
Well, I suppose I asked the question wrong then, and you make a good point. Just child exploitation, maybe that's the better word. I mean, right here in Alabama, just south of me, earlier this year, they broke up a ring. It's like 11 people, but they found multiple 4 terabyte hard drives of less than 1, 2, 3, 4 year olds. Terabytes. So when I start thinking terabytes of pictures and video, just in little old Alabama, right? Some little old town in Alabama, I'm thinking to myself, this problem has got to be infinitely larger than what we perceive it to be.
So I'll answer your question to that in this way. Many times have I been part of cases that had nothing to do with child pornography. Might be a gun case, might be a domestic terrorism case, might have been healthcare fraud. And agents would say, all we need to do is get into his house and into his phones, and I guarantee you there's child porn. And there was. Or, I mean, we had a gun case. We had a guy he was a felon in possession. He had 55 weapons, 55 firearms, and a felon, so he's prohibited. And so, we do the search and we gather electronics too, and there's child porn. There's always child pornography. So that's not, multiple terabytes, but
Right.
that's going to be enough. And you will always find that. So there's people who dabble, and there's people who promote, and then there's people who produce. And obviously the ones who produce are the worst.
And I lied. I got one more question about this, and we'll move on to happier topics. But I appreciate you putting up with me, because I don't get the opportunity to have a conversation with somebody like you very much. The guys that show up, like you explained in the beginning, and they think they're going to trade their 5-year-old for another one, or they're meeting with the 5-year-old and they're just at the Walmart parking lot and they're going to get in the backseat of the van. This is probably a stupid question, but I don't want to assume the answer. What drives these guys with all of the television out there and all of the videos online and YouTube, and everyone's trying to catch a predator? I think to myself, this problem's just got to be so gigantic that once again, these guys just, chances are they just never get caught, and we see a very small percentage of it. Or these guys just have to go after that certain thing, or maybe it's somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. So many times we'll have an undercover on the computer making phone calls. We're doing a sting. We're going to see how many people we can bring in. And, you see a vehicle slowly start creeping around the lot. And then he kind of comes around, he drives through, pauses, and it's all going on in his head. Should I do it? Should I do it? What if, and then they go away. And then, of course, now we follow and knock them down and see what they got on their phone. Because if they're going to do that, they're going to have child porn on the phone. So there's so many where they know this is terrible. And when I would arrest these guys, especially when I was in charge of the case, this is my case, I attempted, and I was successful at it. I didn't bring judgment. There's no judgment on my face. I'm just talking to them because I didn't have to tell them they're disgusting. They already knew that. They felt that already. However, that disgusting, that terrible urge they had was stronger than maybe I shouldn't do this. So there's definitely something driving them. It often is sexual traumatization in their past. And so now they're locked in at that age when they're assaulted, and that's who they are fantasies for. And the cycle goes around and around. These guys were so often the quickest to confess because they knew this is like, they probably had rehearsed their confession because they knew this was going to happen. You can't download this stuff so often. You can't try to go on a meet without thinking there's going to be an end to this and it's going to be like this. And these guys would often confess because they think they themselves think they're terrible. And so, they're ready to go. The other issue with that is they are the most dangerous because they know this is the end of their life. They're usually white dudes who haven't, tasted prison before. They might come from a decent position, and this is totally changing their life. So that's when they either act violently towards us or towards themselves. The sexual predators are the most violent because this is turning their life. They're usually white guys who haven't tasted prison. So this whole situation of us coming to arrest them is turning their lives on their heads. I'd go arrest gang members in Chicago, and these guys are like, okay, they don't know what's really facing them, but they've had repeated contacts with law enforcement. These guys know it's over, it's terrible, and that's why they'd either confront us with violence or take the violence upon themselves.
Was there a specific type that you're dealing with? You said white men. Is that the majority? Was it rich, poor, white trash? What? Yeah. Backgrounds.
And that's funny because I've had so many people ask about Epstein stuff. I'm like, hey, all I can tell you is the guys that I've interacted with, they're not rich. They're usually sitting in their basement trying to numb. Like their numbing isn't oxycodone. Their numbing is pornography. So they have a terrible existence. They haven't been successful. Part of the way that they while away their hours of the day is with this. They hate what they're about. They hate their urges. So yeah, the majority are not in a good position. We definitely had, folks who are professionals too, but so often the ones who are downloading, they have like a nest, just Mountain Dew cans around a bean bag and a big computer setup, and that's where they spend their day.
So for sure there was a type.
Yeah. And then they'd have piss bottles next to them because they just don't want to leave. It was a pretty pathetic situation.
That's all right. Let's move on. I appreciate you indulging me there. I hate that conversation, but I enjoyed it. I think people should hear it. And like I said, I want to, anything I can do to push the use of proper vernacular to make the point, because I think that's covered up because people don't want to hear it. But having said that, you said something earlier about your partners on the SWAT team relative to when you were a pastor. And I have said this as somebody who's, like I don't know if you know, I've done dozens of businesses and have been very, very successful. And in that context, I tell people all the time, a lot of my success came from a group that I joined, so that when times are hard, you have people to bounce things off of. And that sounds like what I heard you say relative to your SWAT guys, that they kind of knew what you were doing, as opposed to being a pastor where maybe you were too young, didn't realize you needed to recruit, those sorts of things. So from a business perspective, which is most of the people that listen have kind of that, are kind of driven towards that direction, or they're entrepreneurs. Talk a little bit more about that, if you will, because entrepreneurship, I don't know if you know, is a very lonely endeavor. It's very hard. It's one of the hardest things you'll ever do, and it's very lonely. So I'm constantly encouraging people, men in particular, the importance of going out and finding somebody to talk to.
Yeah, and my wife's an entrepreneur. Business has been going for 14 years now, so got past those thresholds of 3-5 years and still been successful. So I've seen that, and I recognize that if you're the boss, you're the owner, you're the one who's got to have your shit together. You can't be, you have to be careful of who you're talking to say, I'm scared. I don't know if this will work. This employee pisses me off. You have to have those trusted people. And for me on the SWAT team, there were guys that I knew I could, we had gone through life-threatening situations together. So these are men that I was bonded with. They weren't, just some person. They were ones that together we had come out and through something tremendously bonding. And what I needed in ministry was men that I knew would not judge me, who understood, they didn't have to be pastors themselves, but they at least had to be someone who'd been in churches to know, there's definitely some garbage that goes on. I get it. And I had to feel comfortable saying whatever I wanted. Like, hey, I'm going to tell you some sins. Hey, I'm going to tell you some things that a pastor doesn't normally say, or here's how I'm angry. Here's how I hate these people. And I had to have someone or a group of men who would say, yeah, I get it, and go ahead. I didn't have that. And so that's part of what brought about the stress of having no outlet. And though we had gone through traumatic events and we'd seen some terrible things in the FBI, there were men and women around who could identify. They had waded in the same water as me, and so they got it. And I didn't have to preface anything because they knew the backstory. I didn't have to say, hey, sometimes when we see this, it makes me feel this way, because they had been in the same type of thing too. And that was a tremendous benefit in the Bureau.
Before we get back to the episode, let me ask you something. Are you tired of being told that ambition is toxic? How about masculinity is a problem? And the answer to every struggle is that you should lower your standards. Well, I am. And that is why I built the Kronos Forge. It's a free community for men who want to get more out of themselves, quite frankly. You want to lose weight, build a business, get a promotion, save your marriage, find a relationship, become a better father or an employee, a better friend, a better businessman. How about get your money right? Or maybe just get around men who refuse to apologize for wanting more, something we have done since the dawn of time. If who I am, if what I have built, how I think, and the way that I see the world resonates with you, then you need to get in this room. Nobody is coming to save us, and that is fine with us. Go to thekronosgroup.org/forge or click the link in the show notes. Come check us out. Yeah, I think that's in the Bureau, or in a way, again, the physical confrontations and things that you dealt with certainly aren't what happens, let's say, in a boardroom or even in the day-to-day business. But it is I always characterize it to entrepreneurs, and again, I'm talking about guys, people like your wife, not Fortune 500 CEOs. The average Joe out here, and us, maybe $500,000 a year, maybe $10 million a year. It's still a struggle. But to that average guy, I characterize it as a war. I mean, business is, you have to be on your game. It's got to have a life and death. I always say, if I put a gun to your mother's head, how hard will you work relative to how hard you think you can work on your own? You really got to put that competitive, aggressive mindset to it, and it can be exhausting sometimes. And so I think that it's important that we get people around us who we can at least commiserate with. And in your case, as in so many, it's got to be people who know where you've been and have experienced the same sort of things that you're going through. Hard for you, I would imagine, to be able to connect with somebody who didn't go through those things with you the same way you did the guys in your group.
I didn't know anybody who hadn't who didn't know it to some degree what it was like. I mean, if you'd been in the bureau for any bit of time, you knew what it was like. You know what it's like to see victims and hear horrible stories, to find out you can't solve this problem, to be in a situation where going in, you don't know if that person's going to oppose you violently, and now what that means. So yeah, everyone had that similar experience, and so the language is already there, the background is already there, and it and again, when you have gone through those life-threatening scenarios and come out safely, now you can talk about it together and decompress from that trauma. And again, the trauma can be big. The trauma can be, hey, that could have gone wrong, but it didn't. I'm glad it didn't. But we're talking about after the fact, they are survivor stories of, yeah, we could have been killed, but we didn't. And so now we're going to laugh about it, and we're going to tell dark, jokes about it too.
Yeah, I think, and right there, for men in particular, that's really important. Again, my background, I'd been stabbed, shot at, beaten, lived with hookers and heroin addicts when I was 17 years old in a $25 a week flop house. I mean, I've seen multiple murders, suicides right in front of me. I just had a life. And one of the things I learned about as I got older was how difficult it was to speak about these things, but then also how much of a relief it was to have it come out of my mouth, as opposed to me think about it. And
it's actualized. Now it becomes real when you talk about it. It's not just, you're not just experiencing it. Now it becomes a reality as opposed to this nebulous thing in you.
Yeah. And then to be able to joke about it, which is how men deal with trauma a lot of ways with other men, was also a big deal. And I don't know about you, through the different modalities over the years to just kind of quiet my brain from a lot of this stuff, I would write. And I found writing to be almost as traumatic, writing with a pen, not, typing. But because you had to look at each letter as I was writing it out. And I found that to be every bit as traumatic and cathartic at the same time, because your brain is concentrating on that one word you're writing about, that thing that happened. Speaking the word to somebody else obviously it was very powerful, but at the same time, I took that power back. And writing it, though, again, would set me off in all kinds of ways. It was really an interesting thing, but just being able to verbalize that or talk about those things is so important, going through what you went through, what I was raised. And even in, when you got a $200,000 payroll due on Monday and it's Friday and you got no money in the bank, you want to talk about stress. That's stress.
Yeah. And that stress was more than, me getting in fights with bank robbers. That stress that you're talking about, that's more than, guys picking up guns. Yeah, that stress hangs with you because, okay, you go through everything to solve it, and that same thing's, it's coming up in 2 weeks now too.
Yeah.
And for us, maybe it's naivety that I went in and I came home every time, but what was great is, especially on SWAT, and hopefully this is something that, your listeners can take too. When I approached a house, and the reason SWAT was called was because it hit a higher level of threat. We did what other agents did. We had some better tools. We had a lot more training, but we were called because the threat was deemed higher than just a normal agent arrest. And yet, because of my constant training, here I am in firearms, and I can shoot. I know I'm going to hit my target. I know I am. I'm consistent. And I'm seeing the guys next to me, and I wasn't the best, So these guys are even better. And I'm going through tactics, the footwork, and I'm seeing guys move without words, covering exposed areas to danger. And it almost gives you goosebumps. And you're hitting that flow where now we go to a house and here's a violent felon and we're ready to hit it. And because I'm confident in my competence and I've seen my partners and they're at least as good as I am, there's no buzzing in the back of my head that says, Eric, you might die.
Mm.
It's just focus. I'm not afraid. I just have to think, what's my task? And do I have the tools necessary to complete it? And that forward look without, being hesitant at all, that's how I felt. And I watched everyone else the same way. Nobody hesitating, but controlled and able. And it was because I knew I was good. And I knew I was good because we had practiced it.
Yeah.
And you hit that flow because I'm doing things that I'm good at against the pressure. And in this case, the pressure was possible death. And that gets you into a real ecstatic place as well. So if you said, hey, Eric, can you come speak to 1,000 people on how the FBI carries out an investigation? I'm at peace. I'm calm. It's fine. If you say, hey, Eric, I want you next week to come speak about how to play piano. Well, now I'm stressed because I don't know how to do that. I'm not competent there. The other things, I am a genius in because the FBI gave me the training to be there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the reps. Doesn't matter what it is. The reps are everything, whether you're shooting a basketball or you're about to break down a door, the reps, or again, I say somewhat tongue in cheek to entrepreneurs, you think that's a big problem, right? What you have is not a big problem. I only know that because I've dealt with that problem, and I promise you it's not as big a problem as you think it is, but I thought it was a big problem when I encountered it the first time. So perspective is a big part of that. From an entrepreneur perspective on your side, as I alluded to in my intro, I think that being able to read people or understand people is a huge talent. And I've had 10,000 employees in my life. I think I'm a pretty good judge of character. And I'm constantly telling people that instincts matter in this context. But you said something interesting. When you're in the room with one of these animals that is preying on children, you're not emotional.
Yeah.
You're calm, right?
Yeah.
You're blank faced. And I say there's no money in emotion. You can be passionate about your business, but when it comes to make decisions, there's no emotion, right? These ideas that the motorcycle builder on television and they're screaming and yelling and throwing wrenches at each other and the camera follows them out the door and the door gets slammed, or the restaurant owner and the chef is throwing food on the ground and no one could eat this and all of that. That's not how the real world works. That's not how success works. And so in that context, being calm and reading people and trying to understand what you're hiring and what you're selling to is another, I don't know, arrow in the quiver, so to speak. It's not the only one, but it's one of many. In your context, then, what would you add to that? Having dealt with really where you're reading people and or recruiting people, right, to work for you, informant-wise, things of that nature. What's your take on that?
So here's the thing, Jerry. When I went to the FBI Academy, I'd never handled a gun before. I had no experience in law enforcement, military, anything like that. I'm a pretty smart guy, so I can keep up with what we're doing, and I'm learning along the way. But I had classmates who are here, and I'm here, and then we're both getting better until we graduate. And then as soon as we got into the field, now I was here because I had spent 12 years prior learning how to connect with people. So no matter what technology the FBI has, guns, judicial process, eventually you're dealing with people, with informants, with victims, with witnesses, with the criminals. And so having that experience of talking to someone and not having the answers, but listening first. So that's going to be curiosity. So when you come to me and say, hey, Pastor, I think I've done something wrong. If I just go, yeah, here's some Bible verses that apply to that. I hope those work. See you later.
Right.
That's the last time we're talking. You're like, that guy's useless.
Right.
But now if I dig into you and say, how does that, how do you feel about that? What do you think you can, like, no, we're working together. That was something that I had practiced many times with people, of listening instead of speaking. The church that we established was one without judgment. So we wanted people to come. I told my folks, if we make a mistake, we're going to err on the side of grace. So I'm going to let God judge us for being too welcoming. I'll live with that. And so now I brought that into the criminal world, where this is the crazy situation. So if I had no judgment in how we met, when I'm interrogating you, your mind tricks you because stupidly you think this is most important. What's going on right now is most important. So I'm not going to judge you. I'll save that for court, and you're going to get judged harsher because you're going to confess things to me. But as I come to the criminals and I speak to them kindly and professionally, I find ways to connect with them, to find, even with the pedophiles, even with the sex offenders. I had one guy, 30-some-year-old guy, who had visited a 13-year-old boy and had digitally raped him on a number of occasions, and then oral sex too. And the 13-year-old boy actually looked like he was 10 on top of that. So here I am. I'm interviewing the guy, and he tells me that he loved the boy. And so that's terrible. He doesn't understand what love is, but I get what that emotion is. I know what it's like to love someone. So I'm going to hook onto that, and I'm going to use that because I know that experience, and we can talk about that. And coincidentally, talking about that is going to get you more prison time, because now I'm going to seal up this case. So yeah, the reading people is all in the language that they give, not in the, facial tics or the, up and to the right or whatever they do with their eyes. It is just listening for the cues that people give in their language, because people want to tell the truth. And so if they're trying to lie, those truths will smell just a little off. And so you have to have that perception of, that's not exactly what I was asking, because what you said was true, but you're trying to use that to get away with a lie.
Two things there that I think are really critical that you just said that I want people to hear. I'll go with the second one first, which is the normal person standing there talking to this guy who's telling you he's in love with the 13-year-old boy would want to just take him in the ground and stomp his face into the ground. The normal, anyone with any kind of normal reaction. And I think this is a terrible example, but it's a perfect example of, I have taught forever to stay calm. Change today what we changed yesterday. Change tomorrow what we changed today. Don't be wedded to anything. You have to be unemotional about these things. That's how you can see all of the problems. And you're telling me that in these extreme situations, right, where emotions could be running very, very high, you're doing your job at the best you can by staying calm, right? And doing, this is my second point, listening, not hearing, but listening.
I'm actively looking for something.
Yeah.
I'm trying to grab onto what they're saying to say, let me use that. Yeah.
Yes. And again, as men, I made a video for a guy yesterday talking about this same thing, where I was like, yeah, you don't listen. You cut somebody off before you allow them to finish. So that means you didn't even hear what they had to say, period, because you're so sure you know what the answer is. But he said, no, I heard what you said. I said, no, I didn't say hear, right? I said, listen. It's a very big difference between listening and hearing. And in your context, you're trying to find, get the child rapist, years in jail. We're just trying to make a sale. We're just trying to avoid a problem with an employee, whatever it might be. But I think the actions and the behavior are beneficial in both cases. That is to listen. And then you have to be in a frame of mind, regardless of the world burning down around you or the need to stomp the child rapist in the head. You got to be calm, cool, and collected so you can actually use what you're listening to him say.
Right. So what's my goal in this? My goal is to get him to confess, because that will seal this up and he'll go to prison for the longest time that we can get. We'll have the hammer over him. So that's my goal. Coming in and yelling at him, okay, well, I'm not getting to my goal then. Stomping his head, I'm not getting that goal because now the case is thrown out or what. So I can focus on ahead of time in a cool moment. This is my goal. Now, when the guy starts saying things that are disreputable, disgusting, okay, I'm going to stick to my goal, which is we're going to get the most time possible for you. And when I have come to this criminal's house and I've taken 10 buddies with me and we tear down their door and I put you in handcuffs and I tell you I'm going to take you to prison, is there anything else I need to do to show you I'm in charge?
Yeah.
Because I am. And so now, because I am in charge and everyone knows this, I don't have to act that way. I don't have to act abusive, aggressive when we meet, because if you don't know I'm in charge, you're an idiot and we're going to have problems with our interrogation. Yeah. But every piece of evidence shows I am in control. So I'm going to bring myself down, condescend, and we'll just have a normal conversation that's calm. You're experiencing probably the worst day of your life right now, and I'm here to help you. I'm gonna bring you through this because I've done this hundreds of times.
Mm-hmm.
Let me help you understand what you're going through, what's going to come next, and what you can experience. And so many times bringing these criminals out of that hyper state of fear and calming them, well, now they owe me. Like they feel better because I've done this for them.
Right.
I've helped calm them. And again, this moment is more important than the future for them. This matters most. In the back of their head, they're thinking this is going to go to trial someday, but I have to ease the conflict right now of how I feel. And having been there, I'm going to take advantage of that.
Yeah, and certainly that's in the extreme situation, and I think entrepreneurs can learn something from that. My mother said, best piece of advice my mother ever gave me, I was 14, 15 years old, and she said, you're the rock that everyone crashes. I'm child number 7. And for some reason, she said, you're the rock that everyone crashes against. And throughout my career, with so many employees dealing with these hyper pressurized situations, the employees are going to come to you and you either react, right? Or you do everything you can to what you just described so well in such an extreme situation. But it's the same principles as you bring everything down, give everybody comfort, make everybody feel, okay, that dude's in charge. It's going to be okay. Now, what do we do next?
Absolutely. I went through that with my wife just this morning as she was saying, I'm having difficulty with an employee, and I'm talking it through with her. I said, okay, I want to ask this and do that. And I said, how about if you start with curiosity? And so I'm calm because this doesn't affect me and I can help her through this.
Yeah.
Why don't you start with curiosity? And she says, yeah, I'll ask, why would you do that? And I go, that's not curious. That's not curious. Like yeah. I said, you don't know. Maybe they're having mental health issues. Maybe they're having difficulties. Like actually be open, like actually want to know. You can state, this made me upset when you did that. Okay. But this is how you're going to learn, and be soft with them and get all the facts first. And curiosity gets the facts. Curiosity is what gets, hey, now you're telling me what I need to know to do a better job interacting with you.
Yeah, that's great. That's I love that. I've always said, I'll just tell you a really quick story for whatever it's worth. Everything is my fault. When I was 14 years old, I got robbed, taking money out of an ATM. They put a good beating to me, rolled me underneath of a bus stop, August in Portland, Oregon. I woke up a couple hours later, a couple of buses to get home. There's a square in Portland, in Northeast Portland. It's an oversized in the sidewalk. And as I hit that square, a voice outside my head, I was all broken nose, 2 ribs broken, both eyes are black and bleeding down my front. And this voice, again, I'm delirious, said to me, everything is your fault. I'm poor white trash. My first job as an 11-year-old, you're poor white trash. It said, everything is your fault. Well, I'm telling you, Eric, that stuck with me. If you keep like you're doing, you're going to be like everybody else and no one's going to help you. I don't know where that came from. I didn't have a pastor. I didn't have a counselor. I don't know where it came from. I didn't hockey stick right out of it. My life became fantastic. I had to go through a lot of turmoil, but it stayed with me that everything is your fault. And as an entrepreneur, I approached employees that everything was my fault. If you lost me, I had an employee lose me $100,000, 126 grand one time. And what did I do to put that person in that position to lose me that money and then work backwards from there? I don't hate the person. I hate whatever I did that didn't allow myself to be in front of that problem. And I really found that to be a huge help in dealing with employees in particular.
And was that accountability that you showed then contagious as it set the morale?
100%.
So in SWAT, we have after action reviews. So we hit a house, we do an operation, we return to base, and we talk about what do we do well, how do we screw up, what mistakes, what do we keep, what do we take away. And no one ever would call out someone else because that person was we'd shut the door getting ready, and one guy would go, hey, before we even start, I realize I definitely did this. And that had been established through generations and years that you're not safe if you can't take ownership of what you've done wrong.
Yeah.
And I want to feel comfortable with you. And so guys never called out because they were always first to say, that was my fault, and here's what I did, and here's how I need to change. And so you get that ownership. That's just now it's like a badge of honor to say, right here, that was me.
Yeah,
I screwed up.
It's a superpower.
Yeah,
it really is a superpower. 2 more questions for you. Society today is radicalized in a way I haven't seen in my 57 years. It seems like to me, let's separate or at odds, let's say. Divided, whatever the word is that you want to use. From your experience, there seems to me to be a lot of people, relatively normal people, that seem to become radicalized to do things that, frankly, surprise the hell out of me. I don't know if you've observed that, but I thought I would ask, since I had you here, what you think, if you see this, what you think, what causes it? What brings that on? How do people get radicalized here in the West in particular?
So my experience with that has been the echo chambers, which come out of social channels, chat groups. So the Muslim extremists, the white supremacist extremists, any of those racially motivated or ideologically motivated groups can easily find others in that group. And now all they do, and I had informants get into so many of these, and they're the same every time. It's just, we should do this. Yeah, we should. Yeah. Just guys confirming. No one ever checking them to say, is this right? And so they're all keeping with similar ideology, similar backgrounds, whether it's the Muslims, whether it's the whites, they're all promoting the same thing with no one else bringing an opposing view. So that just ramps it up, and they lack that exposure to someone else in a like status. Gordon Allport wrote about this, the exposure. Like there's a contact theory where people have these ideas and yet they're not open to meeting with the other who is like them in every way except for skin, beliefs, whatever else it might be. So they come together and say, oh, okay, I see that you are a human and you have reasonable points of view, and we just disagree here. And that can bring the rhetoric down, but they don't do that.
Yeah, it just grows, right? It just ramps up.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. A lot of these guys go to these channels in order to get excited and amped.
Yeah.
And it works.
Yeah. All right. Quick speed round. I do this at the end of all of these. 4 or 5 questions for you. I want as short an answer as you can give me, a couple of words, whatever. If you need to take a sentence, that's fine. But just off the top of your head, in no particular order, biggest misconception about the FBI?
Anything you see on the news is DC, and that is 0.05% of the FBI. 99 the majority of agents just want to do those cases in front of them. They don't want nothing political. They want nothing to do with that.
That's a great answer. Somebody who follows politics as closely as I do, I have a very jaded view of that exactly from where you're talking about, because that's where it comes out of. So that's very good to hear. What is one thing every parent should teach their kids?
My gosh. Okay, trying to get a short answer. Valuing people. So if you can, I've always thought I hope my kids are successful in business, earn a lot of money, have a lot of friends, but ultimately I just want them to be happy. I want them to be pleased with themselves. So valuing yourself and valuing people.
Anybody listening, I just want it on the record. Eric and I have never talked before. This is our first conversation. Anybody listening to this podcast will know that is my answer to that question.
Yes. All right.
Well done. I don't care as long as they're happy, I could care less. I got 2 sons in the Army, and I got a daughter I eat dinner with 4 nights a week.
Fantastic.
I'm on cloud 9, and so are they.
If other people say, I once dropped something off for my kid. My middle one works at a school, and I say, "Oh, I'm Nat's dad," and the secretary goes, "We love her."
Yeah,
that's what I want to hear. That makes me happy. They're respected.
That's right. I love that. Book everyone should read.
So I usually go to a book called Nudge by Cass Sunstein. And Richard Thaler. So it talks about paternal libertarianism, which is how this is perfect for your show. I mean, this is how you get people to make the right decisions while they are completely free to choose on their own. It's a great system. The basis of it is you are a creative architect. You have this is what happens. You have a supermarket and you want to promote these cereals, so you put them at these levels. You think kids should eat healthy, so in the cafeteria, you put vegetables up front, but the pudding's there too. So if I want to reach past the vegetables to get the pudding, I can. I'm completely free, libertarian in that, but the paternalism comes with that nudge to say, but we think this is good for you. So that is, I think, a wonderful book for your folks to read to get an idea of how they can promote issues with their people without demanding.
Love it. A couple more here. Greatest lesson from the ministry.
Well, my greatest lesson from the ministry is when I left, and that is seeing that there's a lot of people who don't have the options to make the decisions I always thought they should. And there's influences there. So my eyes have been open to what a lot of the people we talked about today. People go through a lot. I grew up in we didn't have money, but I had loving parents. I could go to college. I have had opportunities that these people didn't. And that takes me out of a position where I think, oh, okay, it's harder for you to make those choices that I might have been promoting in the past.
Last one of these, greatest lesson from the FBI.
So in 24 years, I have gone through a lot of things and seen some terrible stuff. And what I have learned is the ability for humans to be resilient. So a lot of this just came because I got older and saw more examples. The FBI certainly allowed for that. But I, like many people, would have fear of making the wrong choice, not just a bad choice, but like objectively the wrong choice.
Yeah.
And having been through traumatic experiences, poor choices, wrong choices, every time I've seen that my life isn't ruined, it's just recentered. So from life and from the many opportunities I saw in the FBI, I have learned so much more that humans are resilient. There's nothing that you go through that will necessarily break you.
I love that. Well, it kind of dovetails into my last question. After spending 35, 36 years between the ministry and the FBI, whatever the number is, you've seen the best and the worst that humanity can throw at you. Are you more optimistic or are you more pessimistic about people today than when you started?
Well, I'm more optimistic because I understand them more. I came with from the beginning thinking I knew what was right because the Bible said this. I go through experience going, okay, there's a lot more to human beings. And that makes me optimistic because it's not as black and white. It's not as definitive. And so I see how people can overcome, how they can make good decisions. Just seeing humans more than I would have in church helps me understand humanity better.
Yeah, I like that. All right. How do people get a hold of you? You've got a book. Is that upcoming or is it out?
Book is coming out in the fall.
Okay.
The FBI, I'm still waiting for them to come back and tell me that
Approve the
okay.
Stories.
Oh my gosh. So coming out in the fall, and it's called Irreverent: From Saving Souls to Chasing Sinners in the FBI. Tells a story of a young man who never handled a gun, who got to be in the FBI and join the SWAT team and do some crazy stuff. So I've got stories in there that the stories are remarkable. I've read FBI books where guys are going undercover, doing amazing things, working these huge cases, or they write about the FBI as a whole, as an entity, and those have been great. I think if people read my book, they go, wow, that's amazing. And also, I think I could do that. Because I was just a guy. I'm just a guy.
You're just a guy. Look, again, everybody, Eric and I have never talked before what you're watching right now, and this will be unedited, but I always say all the time, man, I'm poor white trash from the streets. And look what I did. I'm just a guy. There's nothing special about me. Real quick, Preacher to Breacher. I have a note here, but I didn't write down what it was.
Preacher to Breacher is my website. And
okay.
And, screw you if you don't think that's a great name for a website.
I love that.
Because I started out preaching and then I was the guy knocking down doors. So folks want to follow at preachertopreacher.com. They can follow along as the book gets ready to drop. You can find me on Instagram at _Eric_Robinson. It's amazing that was still available for me. Or on LinkedIn, type in Eric Robinson, put in FBI, you'll see this face.
And of course, we'll put all those links in the show notes with the podcast. Eric, fantastic. I appreciate you coming on, man. Great stories. Again, like I said, I had some very specific things I wanted to talk to you about since I had you cornered here on the podcast and you could give me some insight. But I think that was fantastic. And thanks a lot for your service and what you did there in the FBI. I know that stuff is not easy. This was to entrepreneurs, anybody listening, I think this was very helpful.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for your time, too.